Perfect. All right, we are live. I have Jason Blake here.
Thanks for having me back again.
Oh, you're welcome. Time makes it good. I give you an outlet to talk about your music, especially if it's like up and coming stuff.
Yeah, I always have things coming out, things in progress too. So it's always nice to talk about it.
So your latest one, mine.
Yeah,
I think mine got lost in transportation somewhere.
I was trying to think. So the last time I was here, I would have been talking about fictional mirrors. Oh, did we ever talk about that one? Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Yeah, so there was fictional mirrors, then there was imaginary cages, and now there's a new album. Since you don't have it, I'll show it to you. It's the Compromise Rationale. And you could see there's a similarity between that and fictional mirrors.
Right.
So let me see if I can put them side by side there. And the reason for that is that this was part one of a trilogy, and this is now part two coming out. So the little bit of the oddball was that other one you showed, Imaginary Cages. So this was solo Warr guitar. I put this out earlier this year.
Right.
But Compromise Rationale picks up where Fictional Mirrors left off. So I think I was telling you that I had this idea to put a musical interpretation to the ego, superego, and id. And so the Fictional Mirrors was the superego.
Yes.
So I used that idea to kind of help me create music that for me musically represented it, but then also I tried to come up with some tones that would kind of represent that. So for the superego, which was Fictional Mirrors, it intentionally took on a little bit of a major key role, and there was less, I would say, darkness that I'm typically associated with. And so this album sits in the middle. This is the ego navigating between the superego and the id. And so I gave it an intentional like split personality almost. And like as the title suggests, even the Compromise Rationale, it's this compromise between the two. And so the back half of it fits in with the Fictional Mirrors portion, and the front half of it fits in with what will be the id album, which will most likely be next year as the final part of the trilogy. So it was an intentional sort of like, it's meant to be actually played in an entire order, where when you have all three CDs, it makes more sense from a musical standpoint, kind of the progression from the sound. But also it just was a fun way of kind of navigating the three albums and thinking about a way to give purpose to each one of them and give a sound to each one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a different way of doing a trilogy. Some of them kind of leave off, but they're not really directly connected. But if they have I was watching something the other night that someone, I guess they must have had a lot of time on their hands, but they were taking different Dream Theater albums and figuring out where one would end and the one where it begins with the other one ends. okay, that's kind of neat, but at the same time, it's like, do you have it, or unless, that would, either someone was like trying to hear it, or it was something intentional and that has like an inside joke type of it. So that,
Yeah, for me, I kind of feel like if you do it intentional from the get-go, it really opens up a lot of opportunities. So I knew from the start of this, in fact, on that first CD, it was entitled on the back of it, The Ternary Instinct Part 1. So I knew from the get-go that this was going to be this trilogy. And I think when you do that, you have certain things in mind. I think when you go backwards and try to create a part 2 to something that wasn't maybe meant to have it,
right.
is when you start to see some of those holes in the storyline or in the sound. And because having said that, it does bind you to certain things that sometimes your creative freedoms are a little bit more squashed, because like there was parts of this where I thought I had something, that I liked, but then it just was like, okay, how does this fit with where this was supposed to end with the last one, kind of a thing. So it does also kind of turn some of the process a little bit more narrow. But I also think that if you have that in mind, it can open up a lot of ideas in terms of like where I want. So I already know where I want the next one to go. The song titles, the album title have already been put in place like back a year ago. So I already knew where it was all going. And I think that kind of aspect of it's exciting and cool. So it definitely like has opened up. And now, having said all that, I am excited for the trilogy to end too. So it's like you can create a new creative process, because I feel bound to this now, and finish it. But it's
The
been
one
fun.
and the one that I showed was one that just kind of taking a little bit of a break.
Yeah, and it's different. So I have three things kind of simultaneously, and I've just added a fourth one, which we could talk about towards the end. I have this, and I have another. I'm working on another album. So this is just me with the instrument. So last night I played a show. This is typically what I play when I do that kind of stuff. So it's really just what the instrument can do. There's no overdubs. It's just the instrument and like some effects. I do add effects, but it's just straight up Warr guitar.
Yeah.
This is me layering. So I usually start with a little bit more of an ambient vibe, kind of towards like the foundation of it is typically kind of rooted in more of an ambient sound. Then I start to create the Warr line over the top of it, which typically ends up sounding a little bit kind of like an Aziola Cry, which is the band I play with, riff, so to speak. So it's got that kind of a vibe going over it. And then over that, I add a lot of layers of the heavier guitars, it's all still playing on a Warr guitar, but it's, distorting it and doing all that kind of stuff. So where this is literally 2 tracks, the melody side and the bass side, this can be up to 30 tracks of layered Warr guitar over the top of it. And then the third part, which is kind of like the foundation of this, comes from this stuff, which is I also put out these are straight up ambient sounding releases. This would be, if for somebody to kind of bring it to the prog world, this is more the Robert Fripp soundscapey kind of stuff, where these other albums have more of that element of the progressive element, the odd time signatures, minus the drums. I oftentimes say that these albums, like the new one, basically it's almost Aziola Cry minus the band, because there's a lot of elements of the progressive sound in this. In fact, the odd time signatures on this album are pretty crazy, some of the stuff that I did on it. So yeah, I kind of see as those three things. So there's a very big difference between that solo Warr guitar, the kind of stuff I could play out live. This, it would be like the new album, be a little harder to duplicate it. I've come up with versions of them, which I think sound cool, but they're very like stripped down versions because there was so much layering on top of that to create.
Yeah. Have you ever, I saw that I'm sure you're going to talk about that fourth project. I don't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah. Oh, and that's a fifth project. I got to tell you.
Oh, that's the
I
fifth
know
one.
what you're
Okay.
referring to. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another thing going on too that I'll mention as well.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing that I mean, you can do all those things and not run out of ideas.
I'm gonna hit some wood here now or do whatever you're supposed to do. I've been at a creative high point right now. The ideas keep coming, and the way I see it is I'm going to keep writing this until the well dries up. So like right now it's been good. I just don't have a stoppage of ideas, and so I keep going with it, rolling with it until that day comes where all of a sudden something's not coming for me. So yeah, and I'm also writing another Aziola Cry album that's been written. I just have to. So the process with that band is I've put together all the music, minus what the guys are going to do on it, but I click it out. I put it on a basically create the Pro Tools session for it and create a scratch track and map everything out. Then I hand it to them, at which point they put all their stuff or they get their ideas, and then we go into the studio to record it. So I'm in the process of doing that. The music's been written. I just have to actually sit down and put it onto a map, so to speak, a musical map. So I keeps me busy.
I mean that instrument, when you especially this one here,
Yeah.
it's just amazing how that instrument sounds. I think it's probably one of the stringed instruments that's out there, if not the most. It's like whenever I hear it, different people, it's like everyone gets a different thing out of it. Whereas from guitar players, a lot of times you find the same,
Yeah,
within reason, sound out of the guitars, but with the Warr guitar, everybody seems to get out of it something different.
very true. Yeah. All of the people playing it, I think we all sound very different from each other, and it's a cool thing as a result of it. The instrument itself, I think one of the things that's so cool about it is that it opens up a lot of creativity. And it's not to say that other instruments don't. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I pick up that instrument, and because I think that it's just the tuning of it's unique, how you play it's unique, everything about it, that you sit down with it, and for me at least, ideas start to pour out of it. So it's not always, I'd like to take some credit for it, but the fact is that the instrument does also help that, because just you stumble across things with it that I think, because it's a little bit more of a new instrument. I don't mean like it hasn't been around, but it hasn't been around for thousands of years, kind of an idea. So there's a lot more that you just kind of come across, and even like every once in a while you'll see somebody come up with a new way of approaching it, and some of the things that I've started doing. So there's my tuning is pretty standard. It's 6/6 tuning. So I have 6 melodies, 6 bass strings, and so I start on the melody side, low C sharp, and then on the melody side, if you're talking from the top, it's a low B, and it goes to a C. That's tuned out in fourths and backwards in fifths, basically. There's other tunings that you can explore that open up ideas. There's where you can have the low strings on the top. So you would have like your lowest string here and then your next lowest string here. So like my lowest strings are all in the middle of the instrument, but you could tune it like that. I've started playing a little bit more like that. So it's uncrossed is what the technique is called. So instead of having the hands going like this, they're actually like on top of each other playing like that. So adding just a new technique to the playing opens up a bunch of doors. There's just so many things that you could do with it. And I think that's what I find so exciting about the instrument. And it's a never ending process. I don't, there's people on other instruments that I feel have moved the instrument to a pretty amazing point. And that's not to say on the Warr guitar there aren't people. There's definitely some people out there doing some amazing things. But I feel like there's also a lot more that can be done on it. Like it's just kind of touching the surface of what the instrument is capable of doing.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's almost like it had almost like an orchestra feel to it. And you did it, and so I could just imagine if you did, you know, when you did that solo, right, you know, with nothing else, that if you were to just do that and just layer it out, it would probably sound like guitar orchestra.
Yeah, that one, the writing process was interesting. So I came up with the idea for that a long time ago. There was this idea of the loneliness inside of your mind. So the imaginary cage that I referred to was your mind, and how sometimes we just get lost in our thoughts. And it kind of runs the gamut, the whole 6 songs, kind of from the artistic person who, you know, you wonder how they come up and create things, to the crazy person yelling at the clouds on the street. You know, what is going on in their mind and in that feeling of being lost. And then what happened was that we all were sent home and forced to stay inside. So the pandemic happens. And so I just thought like, oh, this is the perfect time to write that album, because there was a lot more of a feeling of loneliness where, you know, that year, birthdays, holidays were spent with my family doing this, the Zoom thing. Right. And so it just felt a little bit more lonely. So I thought this would be a nice time, because if there was ever an inspiration to write an album about loneliness, maybe this is the time. So I did that. And so it was an interesting process though. So basically that album, with the exception of one song, was written from the very first note all the way to the last note. And I just kept building on it and building on it. And that's why it's meant to also flow into each other. So like wherever one song ends, it picks up for the next one. But it was a fun process doing that. It was just basically, I wanted there to be a musicality to it. So there's moments where it's, you know, trying to be a little flashy, but also I wanted there to have a sense of structure and song to it. So I don't know where it stands in the world of solo Warr guitar. I mean, there's not a ton of it out there to compare it to, but I'm proud of that album. I think it turned out pretty cool, and something I'd like to do again somewhere down the road. Just,
well, you know, the thing where I think it came from my standpoint of, normally instrumental music is a hit and miss with me. I mean, I like to have a voice with it, and with your Aziola cry, and then to that, it's like the instruments were like voices too, and it kept me, especially the solo one, kept me interested all the way through, because I've listened to some of those soundscape stuff and those ambient stuff. They're very, no offense, they're coma-inducing.
mm.
And with this, it was engaging. That one, it was engaging from the beginning to the end. It's like, you know, if the only reason to turn it off was if there was something else going on in life. But other than that, it wouldn't be one of those albums that you shut off because it just kept, kept you interested. I know there's a lot of people out there that love the ambient stuff. A friend of mine just recently got me into Tangerine Dream, which I thought I was going to be put off with it, but again, I had that same feeling that it kept me engaged the whole time because it wasn't, for the most part, it wasn't staying put. It was continuing. I know there's a lot of ambient that are just, kind of drone and kind of that would.
That's the trilogy has been compared to Tangerine Dream, and I can see it. I mean, it's not exactly the same stuff, but I could see that. What I've tried to do with that, and that's so what you would not probably get into is my straight up ambient stuff. That is a little bit more of that, ethereal kind of sounds. Now, what I like about it is it's all Warr guitar. So people sometimes, in fact, I've gotten that asked to me, is like, this is keyboards, that you didn't do this on guitar, but it is truly all Warr guitar. It's just processed and using, I have a bunch of pedals. It's all analog pedals I use to create it. But how I get around, I guess, that idea you said of just being a little bit more backgroundy with the trilogy music is, once again, I've turned them into songs. So I think of them as having an A section, a B section, coming to a solo section. Now, the solo might not always sound like a guitar solo, but sometimes it'll be, just a heavier part. And then there's always, I like to do the build up thing where in this, which again, I don't want to call it ambient music, but it's definitely got elements of it, because there's heavy guitars in it too. And so to me, it sounds like progressive music minus the drummer. But going back to another point you made too, is that I don't know why, but I do have this, when you said vocals, I just don't make music with vocals, and everything I've been doing is always instrumental. So it's interesting. It's not to say I wouldn't love to work with a vocalist. It's just that there's something about that with vocal music, you lay back a lot to let the vocalist create the vibe of the song, whatever. And there's something that I like about the challenge of having to create that from a musical standpoint and with what I'm doing. So it's kind of what keeps me excited about it. But yeah, everything I'm associated with is instrumental. And then as we start to talk about new bands and stuff, they're all instrumental again. So it's interesting. I guess I haven't met the right vocalist yet.
Yeah, I think the one that you're going to be up talking about, he and his brothers had an instrument.
Sorry, what is that?
He and his brothers had an instrument.
Yeah, exactly.
Right out of, I'm sure I'll probably giving it away as, but yeah, I used to converse with them early in the 2000s, viewed some of their music.
Yeah, I met them at one of their shows. That's how this whole thing got started. So what we're alluding to is the name of the project is called Backward Sky Falling. And so when was it now? It was about 10, 15 years ago. I met Joe Kopecki, and obviously he was the guitarist in the band Kopecki with his brothers. And it's a long story to how it came to be. What I could tell you though is Joe and I started writing music together, and we shelved the project for a while, and he got busy doing his things. I got busy doing my things. And then again, the pandemic kind of brought about some of these, like unearthed a lot of ideas and stuff that were laying around, and that was one of them, where I spoke to him and just said, hey, why don't we get this thing going on? Maybe this is our opportunity. You know, we had some music written, it sounded great. Why did we never get around to recording it? So that became the starting point for bringing that band back together. We added Craig Walkner, which he is in Far Corner. That's another band that's, you know, done some things on the scene. And so we added him, and that was really when things kicked into a different level, because when Joe and I were writing the music, it was always kind of like, all right, well, what could happen here? What might this sound like? And then when we added him, we finally knew what it was going to sound like. And it sounds really great. So we went into the studio a couple months ago, recorded it, and we just mixed last week, 2 weeks ago. And it sounds great. I'm excited about that. So we'll see what happens with it.
So another trio, huh?
Yeah, it's another trio. And that was one of my big sticking points. So you could see, or you can hear a couple moments where it's like, oh, this could have been Aziola Cry. But one of my big things was that I really just did not want it to sound like another version of what I was already doing. And not only did I think we achieved that through a couple of things. One is that the majority of the writing is Joe's writing, and Joe just definitely writes different than me. So that's a part of it. But also we went in with that was very intentional. We did not want it to sound like either Kopecky or Aziola Cry. So we went in with that. And I think that we succeeded in that. It's a pretty cool sounding album that doesn't sound like something that we've both done already before. So yeah, I'm excited for that one.
I've seen a lot of your posts on Instagram, and I believe I watched some of the YouTube.
Yeah, somebody posted something, I believe.
Yeah,
we did a one-off show back in March, maybe. Yeah, we were invited to do a show, and we decided, all right, why don't we just road test this, put this stuff in front of a live audience once, and so we did a show, and I think there's a video out there of that.
Yeah, I like how more and more, especially since the pandemic, when people they got their cameras out, you know, ready to capture something out there, you know. It's like, and I think it's cool, the benefit of people that are further away from where you're at, you know, or if a band is only doing major city tours and yours happen to be a small town that, you know, they overlook, you know, a band would overlook many times. So I think now with a lot of bands on live stream,
yeah, I've noticed the live stream is really picking up right now.
I mean, that's a great way to get your fans from further out that can't get in for whatever reason, you know, whether they can't afford to travel or.
Yeah. Well, during the pandemic, it made sense. It was like the only way to do it. But now I'm noticing it's picking up now, and with touring bands, they're touring and doing a live stream of one of the, or a few of the shows.
I know your District 97 was doing.
Just did it yesterday. Yeah, the show we played yesterday. Yeah, they streamed their live show. A couple of weeks ago, Aziola Cry played with the Aristocrats, and they did it for that show as well.
I think it's just now it's just a great way to reach more people, whatever their reason why they can't get, you know, and I hope that with that happening, with more bands doing that, that maybe the technology will be even better. That, you know, that if a band that's on far reaches of the planet can do a Zoom concert, you know, something like that, that would be kind of cool, you know. if not that, at least for them to do their practice online, just to ideas,
Yeah.
It's out, the technology is out there, and the Zoom thing alone with the meetings have gotten so much better since I started using it back in November 2020. So it's like they're so much better.
Possibilities are endless with what you can do. It's just a matter of doing it, really, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, I keep on saying it, it'll reach a bigger audience, someone that in Japan that has your albums, they can go on live whenever you do your concert, live stream, like one, not every single show on your, if you're doing like a multi-city, touring thing. But if you have that available, they can go to a, place to live stream.
I think that in general, just that's one of the biggest changes with music industry, all that. As people talk about technology and all that as it relates to the record labels, the death of the record label. But what's kind of cool is that before, if you were a smaller band, there was really no way of reaching a wider audience. It was a lot harder to get it into everyone's hands, and it's definitely, for me at least, I found that it's opened up a lot more possibilities for people hearing us from all around versus just Chicago or wherever we're playing that particular time. So it's been a good thing for that.
Oh, yeah.
So that things like that streaming, it opens up to the world versus the local level.
Exactly. That, and like I said, even if they just do it on one of the particular nights, find a special, a venue that can, really give that energy.
Yeah, interestingly, both times that I've been a part of, or it's another band doing it that I was on the bill, they did it at a place here in Chicago called Reggie's. So Reggie's might be that place for that energy here.
Yeah, I keep on hearing about that club. Hearing about, I wish we had something like that. I mean, back home in LA, we've got tons of them all over the place. Anywhere from really nice places to like,
Yeah.
I couldn't. First time I ever went to Whiskey, I was so. I mean, maybe it was, I went there in the 90s and its heyday was the 70s. I don't know, but I just went in there and I'm like, oh, everywhere they talked about it, seemed to be like it was a bigger place. And it was just a small little place. And not that that's bad, but it's like, media and movies and stuff like that made it out to be something bigger than it was, and it kind of ruined it for me a little bit. And I was, my friend's band was playing, I was kind of looking forward to it. And I'm like, hey, this.
Yeah, I think we're lucky here in Chicago, at least. I think we've got some nice venues and a big crowd of people that are into progressive music. I mean, that could be seen. So Porcupine Tree was just in town this past Tuesday, and it was like a who's who of prog artists and fans. Like, I recognized tons of people in the audience, so it was really cool. I think it made me realize that Chicago actually has a nice scene when it comes to that genre of music.
yeah, you know, it's that's everywhere I hear on Facebook when I read people's posts, especially from that area. You know, you got every kind of music is represented in every kind. Whereas, you know, in other areas, like I told you off the camera, you know, that, you know, there's some certain areas that are certain kind of musics and that's it.
Right.
And I think we need a variety of rules. You know, we're going to be listening to the same things over and over. And, and that comes to a point when it comes to bands that they can't see, some of them can't seem to get new ideas, whereas people such as yourself, it's like each one is completely different sounding than the previous ones. Whereas, I mean, obviously you have you know that whenever you listen to Aziola CD, you know that that's Aziola. Whatever way you go, sounding, if you go heavier or you tone it down, stop, you know it's going to be right. But there's some bands, I mean, that label themselves progressive and putting out the same album. That right there, it's tiresome. I think um, when you're trying to turn on someone that's not into progressive rock onto the genre, and then if they happen to fall onto that particular type of band, they go, well, that sounds like it's the 70s. You know, I mean, they they don't try anything new.
Right.
That's granted. I don't think the Warr guitar is what relatively the 80s. These
Yes,
are the 90s.
70s. Well, I count its origin going back to the Chapman stick, but the Warr guitar, its origin, yeah, it just had its 35-year anniversary, so it hasn't been. In fact, wait, let me see. I have actually a really cool, on the back of mine, I got this little medallion. Let me confirm that. Yeah, 91, 30 years, 1991.
And that that instrument is still, it's so amazing. Okay, someone devised that.
I love it. Yeah.
Does it feel weird to pick up a regular guitar after playing
I
that
gotta be
for so
honest.
long?
Yeah, I gotta be honest. So I was a bass player before. And in fact, I'm looking at them. I have them hanging on a wall right there. I can honestly say that it's been at least a year before, more since I've even picked one up. One of the things I did, and I think it's worked out better for me. I'm glad I did it. I don't have any regrets on this, but one of the things I did is I was playing bass, and then I picked up, it was a Chapman stick at the time. And my initial thought was it was going to be the supplement for bass playing. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to just throw myself into it and put the bass down and call myself, at the time, a stick player. And then it was about 2 years later that I got my first Warr guitar and then became a Warr guitarist, and just said that that's what I was going to do. I think that because I did that, what it allowed me to do is that I don't think if you're a bass player who kind of supplements it, it allowed me to get better on the instrument. And when you devote your time and energy to one particular thing, I don't know, I guess it's that jack of all trades, master of none idea. I just kind of went, not that I'm calling myself a master by any stretch of the imagination, but it allowed me that opportunity to grow exponentially on that instrument versus when I was just treating it like the instrument that I would pull out for a song kind of a thing. And so that was a conscious decision, and I don't regret it at all. I like, some of my favorite musicians are still bass players. I do follow that as an instrument, but I'm definitely more happy with the fact that I've just become devoted to this instrument in particular.
Oh, I was just looking in the chat thing. Someone was asking, heard of guitarist Mark Cook?
Mark Cook, yeah. Asking if I know if I've heard of him.
No, if you heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's not. That's the interesting thing about. It's not the biggest community in the world. In fact, I would say, it's a name that's actually did a nice job of building the community and kind of bringing us together is an Australian guy, Finbar. He did. If there's an interview, the one I did with him came out about a year ago, around this time, maybe. But he called it 10,000 miles to Tap Town. And it was the distance from where he's at, and I believe he's in Sydney, Australia, to LA, where the origins of the tap guitar. And so he did a program interviewing people associated with the instrument and from manufacturers to players. And it's really cool, by the way, if you get a chance, look it up. But it's got interviews, from Trey Gunn to Marcus Reuter, myself. Mark is one of them that's in the interview from that. But it's not the biggest community in the world. I mean, eventually you run out of players. That's not a program he could keep going for years and years, because eventually, after the handful of names doing something, I guess you could probably start to interview, the people who are doing things in, local levels or smaller levels too. But the people out there making a name for it, eventually you kind of run out of the people. But of course, Mark Cook is one of those names where the name's definitely around, and he's done some very cool stuff with it.
Right. Yeah. That's, I would, once I asked, I was looking at the guy's question, asked I was like, it's going to be very tight knit community.
Yeah, it is. There, and another thing that connects them. There's a handful of little I know Trey Gunn and Marcus Reuter run one, or used to. At least I haven't seen it since the pandemic. But they do these tap circles where people come together with any form of tapping instruments, so whether it be a stick, a Warr guitar, or other variations, and they're like little week-long camps and stuff like that. So that's been a nice thing to kind of build a little bit of a community as well. So there's things like that go on. I think there's a little bit of a, I'm going to say this, but I don't know, maybe I'm making this up. I think there's a little bit of a buzz about it right now. It just seems like there's an interest in it. It's a little different, but you have guys like Felix Martin, who created his own FM guitar, two necks. Now his is just like two necks of a guitar, two necks of a bass, but it's still played with the tapping method. I think that, whether it be guys like him doing that, I think there's a little bit more of a buzz. Mark Warr has recently come back and has designed a new Warr guitar, which is exciting. Go to warrguitars.com to see pictures of it. It looks amazing. Can't wait to get my hands on that when it's ready. There's just a little bit more of a feeling of a buzz right now, with between Finbar's program and some of the news kind of coming out. It feels like there's a little bit going on right now with it. We'll see.
long as, you know, like people like you keep it interesting. I think that's the main issue, I guess. Whereas like they're just not just flash. So you know, we've seen it in the '80s with the shredding guitar players.
Yeah.
It just takes away from what instruments do. Just so fast that it just there's nothing soulful.
Yeah, I mean, I love playing the instrument so much that I just love talking about it. So it comes up a lot of times when I'm asked or interviewed, even if it's about a specific band, obviously the instrument comes up. So I mean, I'm fan number one of the instrument, and then so it's easy for me to just be out there constantly promoting it and talking about it because I just think it's such a cool instrument. So maybe
And
more
also
people will start to play it.
and also for it to be used, you know, before I found out about you guys, Aziola Cry, the only time I heard Warr guitar was Ray Gunn did it, and then Marcus Reuter did it. That's so it's like for it to be an metallic thing. It was like, and I wonder if anybody ever did that.
Did you cut off for a second with the Chapman
Okay.
stick?
Yeah, if they ever did something like how you did with Aziola Cry, Chapman stick. I haven't heard, but
Well, I would say the best example of that right now is Stickman, Tony Levin. So, but it has Marcus Reuter and he's playing that. He actually has his own guitar. They're called touch guitars. So he's playing a touch guitar, and Tony Levin actually just started playing a touch guitar as well, which looks a little closer to a Warr guitar in that it has a body. Those look like beautiful instruments. I've never played one, but I would say Stickman was and is probably the best example of the stick. It was initially it was two stick players and Pat Mastelotto on drums. So there's an idea, or there's a band with stick as the lead. There's got to be other ones out there with the Chapman stick as the lead, or doing that kind of a thing. I don't know. I think I've moved a little bit since I started playing Warr guitar. It's interesting. I mean, they're so intertwined, really, because they're similar, but they almost feel like different worlds too. In that, like, I'm very well aware of what Trey Gunn is doing, playing the Warr guitar. I'm not so aware of some of the stick players anymore. And I guess I should maybe get a little better at going back to stick.com and looking at who some of the artists are. But, back when I was playing stick, Greg Howard was a name. He was doing quite cool stuff. Trying to think some of the other people. There was a local guy I used to play with in Detroit, Glenn Porman. I liked what he was doing. So there's that. And I should mention too, the first Aziola Cry album actually was me on stick. So that was prior to me getting the Warr guitar. It actually was recorded with a stick. So
again, that's another interesting instrument. Obviously, Tony Levin, but I had a friend of mine's band in Los Angeles. They used to, their player, he was a stick player. He also did bass, and primarily it was stick. The other one he did was the NS stick.
I don't know.
It's an N/S.
Oh yeah, the NS stick. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to do that, and but he was a very melodic, wasn't aggressive, more of a melodic player.
Um,
On shift.
yeah, Don Schiff. Yeah. There's some of these names are coming back to me because as you were thinking that, I was thinking some of the other names. That Don Schiff is a big guy on the stick. There's Bob Culbertson. If you're ever like, I see him here in Chicago. He plays the Chicago Art Fest, the Old Town Art Fest. I've seen him there a few times. Yeah, there's definitely some people doing some cool things on the stick as well. You know, one of the things I actually did when the pandemic started is I bought, a lot of it's kind of become a thing now where people sitting down playing the stick, they make these little wooden lap kind of things. So instead of clipping it into your belt, you just put it onto this little wooden plank basically that lays across your legs. And I had bought that and started playing stick a little bit. And I don't know, it's just not for me. I still own it. It's sitting right there. But I thought that might entice me to play it a little bit more. I could just sit there and noodle around with it. And there's something about the Warr guitar that for me personally, I like a lot more. So I immediately gravitated back to it. But it's definitely a cool instrument. I'm not taking anything away from it. It's just that I think it's just a personal preference for me personally. But
Ever think of doing something with both of those instruments?
with what? I'm sorry.
Think about doing something with the Warr guitar and the stick. You know, just.
Oh, yeah.
Or is that opening up a can of worms there for you?
Yeah, I mean, to me that they're so similar that I don't. I can get what I want to. If I wanted to do something with the stick, I can get it doing the Warr guitar. So to me, it's not really like I would ever feel the need to do that. The strings, like, just not to get technical with, but the string spacing is a little tighter on the Chapman stick than the Warr guitar, and I like it might be a larger neck, but I like that. The Warr guitar has a little bit more of a gap in between the melody and the bass side. That's to help alleviate the crosstalk, which is the crosstalk between the melody. And so you don't want to get, if you distort the melody side, you don't want to get some of that distortion on the bass side. Things like that are what I really like about it. So the stick, it has a nice bouncy tone. I always feel like the stick has that very unique tone to it. But in most of the instances where I'm playing, I'm either playing the role of the bass guitarist or I'm playing the role of rhythm, but I don't necessarily look to be that Chapman stick player sound in what I'm doing. So that's kind of where I like the sound I can get with the Warr guitar better. So.
Yeah, okay, I thought I'd throw that out, see if, you know.
I do still own one. Like I said, it collects dust more than it gets played right now.
You could just rent it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. So getting back to your new CD.
Yeah, the new one.
Yeah, show that to them.
The Compromise Rationale. That one, the Compromise Rationale. This one.
Yeah, that one. So that people, you have the band camp, or do you do it from your?
Yeah, so you could buy it it came out on Wayfarer Records. So I've been associated for about a year and a half, maybe a year, with a record label out of Washington State, and absolutely love it. I have pure freedom to kind of do my thing and Dave from Wayfair just kind of lets me do it, and I love that. So it's an ambient label, and what I love about it is that, like, all the artists are very different sounding from each other, but I definitely kind of push some of the limits of ambient music with my heavy distorted guitars and all that kind of stuff, and I love it that he just lets me do it. But it came out on that label, so you can either go to that page, wayfarrerecords.com, or my own website is a link to my Bandcamp page where you can find it as well. It streams everywhere, so you can also find it that way as well. I just put out a video for this album. So one of the things I've really enjoyed doing, I started with Fictional Mirrors. I did 2 for that one, and then the first one for this album just came out, and they're animated videos that they tell what I want to tell, but they do it in a very artistic sort of way, a little bit more of a symbolism, using symbolism, and kind of trying to give the audience like try to figure out what it is and how this applies to the music, kind of an idea. So I came in upon somebody who's been an absolute pleasure to work with, Alex Smith, and he creates the videos for me. And so the new one just came out for the opening track on this album. It's called A Certain Balance. And if you go to my YouTube page, you can find that as well. They're pretty cool animated, trippy videos. So I'm excited about this album. This definitely is, for people who like the Aziola Cry thing, I think they'll like this because it's actually pretty heavy at moments. So it ventures into a little bit closer to that type of music. Somebody, a review just referred to it as music for your own personal apocalypse. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, you could take it either way, but in a positive way. Yeah. Okay. That's a good.
I mean, I get where he was going with it, because it
Yeah,
actually has that vibe to it.
Oh yes, but I'm sure we're going to be expecting to hearing a lot of music that falls under that description. Sure, we hear a lot of that, but I think that's got to be one of the most unique descriptions I can give.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to use that one, because to me I can totally get it. I know what exactly they're trying to say about it, and I could see it. It has a sound to it that feels kind of soundtrack to an apocalyptic kind of movie type thing. I could see where they're going with that, so I like it.
Well, that's what everything that I've heard from music so far. If someone can take it and use it for a movie soundtrack, it can fit with it, because you start, since it's instrumental, you can just put on your headphones, close your eyes, and then let your imagination go, and you can probably visualize. People can visualize very similar things when they listen to music, but at the same time, different stuff. Where and I'm sure musicians love it when everybody has something different. They're not all sounding, oh, well, that sounds like you were doing one thing. Everybody will say, oh, it's the same thing. They have the same outcome.
Yeah, that's always been my goal with this music, and specifically because I do instrumental music, because I always want it to. That's why a lot of times I create my own. I think I've mentioned this before, and when we were talking about Aziola crying stuff, I always create a storyline to everything that I do, because it grounds me to the music and kind of ties it into having a purpose. So it's not just a series of songs for the sake of it. There's supposed to be kind of a ebb and flow to the music, and there's a beginning and an end. There's a feeling of like the story has come to an end, kind of a thing. But then the other thing that it allows me to do is like be creative with like where people interpret it versus my interpretation, and kind of allow people to just listen to it and create something in their own vision or of hearing it. So I've always found that to be kind of exciting, which does lead to, you mentioned film kind of thing, like that is an eventual goal of mine. And I do feel like some of this stuff would be great to be licensed out for films. And that's kind of where I'd like to go. It's one of the things on so I've got so many albums that are like good to go, ready to come out, that will be next year. So probably late next year or something, or maybe even next year after that. I do have this soundtrack to a short film. I got to figure out when to put it out, so it's just not competing with everything else that I've got going on right now. But that'll be something that I'm looking forward to as well.
Now, we were talking at the top of it, at the fourth thing and the fifth thing.
So the fourth thing was Backward Sky Falling. And the fifth thing is one of the things I did this, actually it started late last year. I think it was like December I started writing this. The intent was to start writing a new Aziola Cry record, and I found that I wrote a lot of music that to me just didn't sound like Aziola Cry, but it was definitely progressive, and it wasn't Backward Sky Falling either. So it was, I call it, I think it's closest related to this, just because this is just Warr guitar and it sounds like it doesn't need additional instruments. I wrote an album of progressive rock with just myself, and then it came time to recording it, and I had this idea. So I reached out to Marco Minimum, and so he's the drummer on the album. So it's just myself along with him, and I'm excited. That's going to come out next year.
Yeah, I remember years back he had a different little project that he did where I think he recorded all his drum tracks and sent it out to different musicians.
Yeah.
For them to add their, whatever they wanted on top of it.
Was one of them. Trey Gunn was one of them. He did, I think it was called the Modulator. It was based on a drum solo he did.
Yeah. I remember a friend of mine, he did something for it, and it only came out like on a CDR. Just he only did it for a few people. He wasn't sure that he would get something mass produced. But I told him, I said, "You should have just let it. And see if it."
That's cool. Yeah, that was a cool idea. I remember when that came out, there was a handful of releases that came from that idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's kind of cool that you got the deal.
So this didn't start with his drums. So this started with my compositions, and then he added drums to it. Yeah, it sounds incredible. I can't wait for that.
Oh yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, for sure. And I got an opportunity to play with them. Like I said, the other week, Aziola Cry played with the Aristocrats here in Chicago. So that was fun as well.
It's cool to it's a lot of the things, someone's what they've done to have other people add on to it. They may or may not ever meet the person, and you got to meet them.
Yeah.
And play, alongside.
Right. Yeah. So next year will be a busy year. I mean, this year was a busy year, but next year, in terms of releases, I've got a bunch of stuff basically done, waiting, putting final touches on artwork, or little things like that. I'm creating some videos right now for next year, but there's a lot going on. So I now the question is, like I mentioned earlier, just kind of finding time to put it all out where it's not competing with each other. The good news is most of the stuff that I'm doing is technically different genres. So I don't think an ambient album is going to necessarily compete with my more prog thing, but still, just so it doesn't feel like I'm putting out too much stuff next year. I got to figure that
Right.
out.
What I'll do is I'll put all the links for what we talked about tonight down below, so people can go
Cool.
to them, and especially go, streaming is nice, but if you could purchase, whether it's
Yeah.
on CD or on digital, that would definitely help you, so that you can continue to make more music.
Totally agree. Yeah, I always tell people that stream is available, but definitely it's a lot nicer if and I go through the painstaking process. As you were holding them up, I'll hold them up again. Like this artwork here is done by Michael Karts out of Poland. I think he does a fantastic job. Again, you can kind of see the continuation of the two albums and how they're meant to fit together. I mean, it's a beautiful layout for the digipack. And then I also use an artist out of, this is Germany. This is Haku Muller. And I love what he did for that cover. He's actually doing my next one. We're talking right now about working on something right now. So like, I hope people have the interest to buy the CDs just simply for the sake of, you put a lot of time and energy into the inside art and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little bit more to it than just the stream picture. That it is what it is, but
well, I honestly, I look at it this way: do both. Buy the physical media or the digital media, and then stream it. Because you could be out somewhere and you don't have your collection right within your fingertips. So, it'd be nice. You could go say, "Hey, I know this band. You guys got to check it out," and you can pop it up on your phone or whatever and stream it out for them to hear it and say, "Hey, check it out."
Yeah,
I think if it's used that way, like an advertising, to get people, because people describing what the music sounds like is one thing. Hearing it, then you can get a better grasp. Okay, is this something that I'm going to enjoy? And now you hear it, so the next step is a lot of the bands that I've interviewed, artists I've interviewed, they're on independent labels, so you guys need the CD sales.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always nice when somebody purchases it. So,
oh yeah,
purchases what's nice. So,
oh yeah, I'll put all the links down. To
appreciate
your music. You're one of the more interesting musicians out there that it just doesn't sound like anything else that's come before. It's like it's like you're consciously being a progressive artist, not staying still on one thing and then course, having multiple projects too, you can
I
delegate
appreciate that.
delegate your artistic ideas to different locations. You can say, okay, this is going to be heavy stuff, so sort of put it, as the ambient, maybe solo, things like that, and then working with other musicians outside of Aziola, that kind of gets even more their artistic
Yeah,
ideas, because if you're used to with Aziola Pride, those two guys, and then if you get with two other people, you're gonna have things that you may not have thought
right.
about. Yeah, so it's like, that's why it's always good, make it with different types of musicians so you can get different outcomes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think as a result of it is another thing that's kind of happening for me right now. It's been kind of nice is getting some session work. People asking for the Warr guitar to be on a track of theirs or something like that, and that's been kind of nice too. So it's been a busy time right now, and I'm loving it.
Hey, when you're busy, you know, you're not being consumed by other issues of the world. You're you're providing the rest of us with the distraction, world events, that we need. We need these distractions because I was telling someone earlier, different subject. People have forgotten how to be, and I know with myself, there's two modes of art that make me happy. It's music and movies. I can get, you can get into those, and feel happy, and it's like all the rest, all the woes just kind of vaporize out into the ether, and more people just,
Yeah, that's the
acting
brilliance of music. Music is, I think, so powerful on that level.
great escape.
Yeah,
I think it's probably the greatest escape you can do without
yeah,
actually leaving your body. You can,
right. I agree. Yeah, and think about like how music has a way of putting itself into time periods of your life.
exactly.
Yeah, it's so powerful throughout your entire life. It plays a major role, whether you think about it or not. I mean, I don't think people consciously sit around talking about it all the time, but everybody could probably think back to a particular summer and name the song that defined that summer for them. It's a powerful tool in our lives.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty of music.
Yeah.
Oh, someone in the room says maybe I can offer to help Jason spread his album with some promoting.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Oh, I got someone in the. I'm not sure if you can see the chat room or not.
Oh,
There's someone in there that sounds like he's willing to help promote your music.
oh, nice.
His name is Michael Jobborn. Probably mispronounced it. If you go back in the
Okay.
chat, you can see his name there. But you're on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook, my website, there's contact places there, jasonblakemusic.com. That's an easy place to get in touch with me. So
Yeah.
I'll take a look personally to track that person down. But otherwise, yeah, I can be gotten in touch with. There's that's the nice thing about social media now. There's so many ways to get in touch with me, it seems like.
It's good and bad. It's good because then you get the right people, but then I mean, you can probably get trolls, that are just constantly asking you for free things, It's like, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are still doing that. I remember about 20 years ago, and the internet was really big with music. There was a lot of people saying, "Oh, send me your CD, and I'll review it." And then they say, "Well, I've never seen the review." It's like, because all they want is the free music. There's still a lot out there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But got that going. We got upcoming music. There's. It seems like each year that I've spoken with you, you just getting like a momentum going more and more, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't wait for our conversation next year. Hope we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. It's kind of like a documentation of the year as our conversations, kind of looking back and seeing what's happened.
Yeah, it was.
And next year when we talk, like I said, I've got so many things coming out. We'll have a lot to talk about. All these things that I'm mentioning now will be out. And it's a bummer actually, and I'll off on the side sometime outside of this. I want to get your reaction. So it's a bummer this didn't come in time. I don't know what's going on with the mail because it was sent out plenty in advance. But when you do get it, you got to let me know.
Oh yeah. I just can expect, great things going to be going through my ears.
Cool.
Well, thank you again. I got you now. This is now third time, second solo. The other time was with Aziola.
Yeah.
Hopefully we could do another one with Aziola Pride.
Yeah, well, the goal is to have a new album by next fall, so that would be a good time for the band to come back in.
Yeah, and we could talk about band stuff and then your solo stuff too. Now and then.
Cool.
Have lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, well, thank you again.
Yeah.
I really appreciate and taking the time out of your day to do this.
I appreciate it as well. So thank you for always having me on like this. I
no problem.
love it.
All right. Well, I will talk with you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. Bye-bye.